Welcome back everyone, it's Mags, and I'm sorry to inform you all that I have been diagnosed with critical levels of brain rot. I had never played Hyperdimension Neptunia, but from the outside looking in, it has always looked like a fascinating series to me. It's clearly very sizable in terms of number of games, what with the ridiculous amounts of weird spin-offs it's had over the years, which is intriguing in and of itself. It's one of those multimedia franchises where you see the characters all the time, but hell if you know anything about it. It's always looked larger than life, and yet all the general conversation around it suggests that its reputation is questionable at best. It's fan servicey, low budget, popcorny, whatever the kids are saying these days. Are you really telling me those are supposed to be bad things? I've seen videos entirely dedicated to defending the series against this kind of reputation. And you know what? That is just the kind of bait to set out to get me to crawl out of my little gremlin hole. Because clearly, there's something going on here. Neptunia specifically always caught my eye because just from looking at it, I loved how vibrant the aesthetics were, how much fun it seemed to have with itself by being so goofy. I loved a lot of the character designs, especially Neptune herself, and you know what? I can get down with some popcorny fun. It has a goddamn zombie spin-off, come on! Yes, I want to play this. What is going on? And so, my friends, I embarked on the very first entry. The Neptunia series is unfortunately plagued with remake disease. There are 4 main titles, and every damn one of them has been remade, with the first remakes of the first 3 games intended to flow nicely with each other and be similar in terms of graphics and gameplay. These are the Rebirth games. I have to specify that they are the first remakes of their respective entries, because the very first game has actually been remade twice for some ungodly reason. Anyone who's ever looked into the franchise has undoubtedly been confused with what the hell is going on here with all these different versions of all these different games that admittedly already have confusing titles in the first place. This is not Neptunia 7. Also, apparently the first game is entirely in a universe of its very own. Neptunia 2 onwards is in a different timeline, and that's not the only time that happens from my understanding, just to make things a little more confusing. Now, I'm the kind of person who really hates to miss out, especially in the case of the first game. The original and Rebirth are so wildly different, so I always knew I'd be hit with this kind of choice paralysis as soon as I decided to play the series. The logical copium is to just accept that at the end of the day, it is what it is. Might as well just pick one version and play it, and not worry about it any further. Rebirth seems like the most popular one. It'll flow with the entire remade trilogy. It's much more accessible than the PS5 exclusive ReVerse, so please, for the love of God, just don't worry about it. Just play Rebirth and move on with your life. Just don't worry about it. I worried about it. Rebirth 1 was so clearly a celebration of the series up until that point. It mishmashes a whole bunch of aspects from all the games that had already released before it, complete with cameos, extra playable characters, dungeons, costumes, etc. That's super cool, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it only made me feel more out of touch with what was going on. Neptunia started from somewhere, and this was not it. I wanted to see pure, distilled Neptunia 1 as God intended. Plus, the original Neptunias have Nisa and Rebirth doesn't, so actually Rebirth is kinda dog shit. As for ReVerse, the second remake of Neptunia 1, listen, I got nothing. This is literally just Rebirth 1 again. I mean, they remade the remake. It does have a few new things, as we'll discuss, but it's almost exactly the same. But for completion's sake, why the hell not? I mean, it has fishing, so it's the best Neptunia game of all time. And so, because I am absolutely deranged, welcome to the many different versions of Hyperdimension Neptunia. Before I get into the details of the games themselves, I want to be an absolute shill real quick about the overall appeal and nature of Neptunia. Now, as I've already implied, I played Rebirth 1 first. That was my very first Neptunia game. It's extremely different from the original, as we're about to discuss, but I fell in love with this game. Again, I went into the series with the impression it wasn't too well liked by non-fans, so I want to discuss why that is and what I found the actual appeal to be. The thing you need to understand about Neptunia is that subtlety is not a word that exists in its vocabulary. It's a blatant parody of the game industry as a whole, filled to the brim with video game references and fourth wall breaks. Although maybe calling it parody is a little generous, as that implies it actually has something to say, which it doesn't. At least that's what I gathered from Rebirth 1, but the original actually does have some more meat on its bones in that regard. Overall though, it's simply here to make jokes and laugh, and you know what? Fair enough. This game is so unbelievably on the nose with it that I can see why some people would be turned off. This is not subtle commentary. This is Neptune looking straight into the camera and saying, "Mario Brothers, now laugh." Their world is literally called Game Industry. The main lands are so obviously named after real game consoles at the time, like Louis, Last Station, and Lean Box. You know, the green one, with popular games such as Hoop Reach. Do you see what we're dealing with here? Now, combine these absolute shenanigans with provocative character designs and this being a CG within the first 10 minutes of the game, and you can see where its reputation comes from. Even I, who thought themselves totally prepared for Neptunia's insanity, was caught off guard. Truly, the sheer joy and whimsy of Neptunia is a powerful force indeed. Now, to clarify, I have no issues with fan service, but a lot of people just seem to react weirdly to it, so games like this are going to get a lot of flack, and I think that's really unfortunate. The main thing that really made me end up loving the game was its goofiness. What I said about Neptunia being so over the top with its dumbassery is actually what made it so damn funny. It knows that about itself, and it's borderline impressive how dense and chock full of references it is. Like, that becomes funny in and of itself. It's self-aware not just in a meta, fourth wall breaking sense, but in that it just embraces its own silliness at every corner. There's an enemy type in Rebirth 1, which later I found out originally appeared in Mark 2, that's just like a JPEG of a mock-up visual novel screenshot. Like, that's the shit you're gonna see constantly. Yes, I do want to beat up 16:9 hot blushing guy, thank you very much. That was the point where I just went, yeah, this game kinda fucking rules. Neptune herself, I don't think ever utters a serious sentence ever. Everything that comes out of her mouth is a joke or a tease, and yet she's actually shockingly well written. When things in the story are getting serious in any way, she'll lighten things back up, and it's very obviously deliberate. She'll acknowledge that the mood just needed to change ASAP. She makes it pretty clear that she teases her friends because she cares about them, and you can see that in the way her jokes are mostly poking fun at their very specific personality traits and tendencies, showing that she actually knows them on a deeper level than they think. And that's the very kind of thing good friends do, although everybody involved will try to deny it, of course. She is everybody's favorite force of pure positivity. The constant bantering of the cast, mostly perpetuated by Neptune's shenanigans, is extremely entertaining, and I'd say that's actually Neptunia's strongest aspect. But, as we all know, this is not where the series started, so let's finally get into the weeds. We need to go not to Rebirth, but to Birth of the 2010 to 2011 video game Hyperdimension Neptunia for the PS3. Made by Compile Heart and Idea Factory, published by, hey, NIS America. We're a little bit familiar with them here on the channel, although quite a few other studios also helped out, including Gust of Atelier fame and 5PB, who produced the opening and ending songs to the game. All of these companies' influences on the game run deeper though, as you will soon see. The world of Game Industry is split into 4 main landmasses, which are actually giant islands floating in the sky around each other, which is sick as hell. Each one is ruled by a goddess. Black Heart for Last Station, Green Heart for Lean Box, White Heart for Louis, and Purple Heart for Pleneptune. Noir, Vert, Blonde, and Neptune respectively. The goddesses are also known as console patron units, or CPUs. They live in their own place called Celestia, and in fact have been fighting each other up there for the past 1,000 years, while the citizens down below cheer for the ones that they worship. Take a wild guess as to what this war is known as. Of course, it's the console war. Growing tired of their eternal stalemate, they decide to gang up on one of them to remove her for good to try to make their lives easier. Purple Heart, or Neptune, is the lucky winner. She can't hold her own 3-on-1, and thus is cast out of Celestia. A console that dropped out of the war named after a planet? Psh, nah. She hits the ground at Mach 4 so hard that she loses all of her memories, even including the fact that she's a goddess, because her head wasn't already empty enough. But while unconscious, she dreams of a girl named Histwire, a legendary book that holds all knowledge of Game Industry. She claims to be sealed away and begs Neptune for her help in releasing her by collecting all 4 of the key fragments scattered throughout the 4 landmasses. From there, Neptune meets the 2 other characters that make up basically the entire main party. Kampa, a student in nursing school who finds Neptune on the ground and nurses her back to health, and IF, a lone traveler who they encounter shortly afterwards in a monster cave. They both agree to help Neptune, and so they travel across the world of Game Industry in search of the key fragments. For those more familiar with Rebirth, or just literally any Neptunia marketing, it may come as a surprise that the other goddesses play a very small role in this one. I mean, even at the time they wanted to market otherwise. The box art of this game doesn't even show IF and Kampa, and opts to show the goddesses instead, but in reality they're more of minor antagonists than anything for almost the entire game. And it's not until near the very end where you can recruit them, but even that's optional and something you have to go out of your way to do, although it is a prerequisite for getting the true ending. This is a stark contrast to Rebirth, where they join much earlier and are a big part of the main cast. The ending section of the original game, where Neptune can finally get through to the goddesses and they end up working together, is more reminiscent of what the entirety of Rebirth is like, with the goddesses joining the party, being much more prevalent in dialogue, and all bantering with each other. In Rebirth, Compa and IF being the only non-goddesses and having nothing to do with this whole console war business makes them feel pretty shafted pretty fast, which is why I can really appreciate the original in that regard. Neptune, IF, and Compa are the main heroines and only party members for almost the entire duration of the game, making them feel a lot closer as friends and letting you get more attached to them. Of course, this is barring DLC, which lets you recruit a few other party members, but I'll talk about that later. I do really love Neptune, IF, and Compa as a trio. Neptune is, well, Neptune. Not a serious, intelligent, or filtered bone in her body. Unbelievably blunt, but never malicious. But alongside her, you have Compa, a nurse in training, your archetypal high-pitched and soft-spoken cutesy girl with a little bit of an attitude. Both of them are incredibly positive and optimistic though, especially Neptune. And then there's IF, the closest thing this game, and maybe the series, gets to an intelligent sign of life. She steers the group in the right direction, but is far from stuck up and still knows how to have fun, making her the perfect thing to tie the group together. The game is set up in a mission-based structure. There's the Explore menu, which does everything that progresses the story, which means watching new cutscenes until the next dungeon unlocks. It's also where you can accept side quests that open up new dungeons. The Search menu is where you can actually access those dungeons. All the main story dungeons are one-time only and disappear after you complete them, which is a little bit annoying. You can only revisit that dungeon if there happens to also be a side quest that takes place there, because those stay permanently. I mean, for normal play it doesn't really matter, but it is a pain if you're trophy hunting and need to fill out the bestiary, because why would you subject monsters to only appearing in one-time only dungeons? This game does that. Why? I just want to talk. Most of the time, dungeons have you beating a certain boss inside, but sometimes the goal is something else, like defeating a certain amount of a specific enemy or collecting specific items that enemies drop. The dungeon designs in this game are really what give off the more industrial, gritty vibes this game has, as opposed to the more vibrant scenery that the series has come to be known for since. It's kind of shocking. You go through dark factories and caves, fighting monsters that do not mesh with the fantastical, bright designs of the characters. Even in Rebirth, I thought some monster designs looked very often this way. Like, what is this scary ass thing doing in my Neptunia game? Oh, that's from the original. That explains it. And so are you, and so are you. It seems like they might have originally been going for something more serious than it ended up being. I mean, there's so much here that is uncharacteristic of the rest of the series. The intricacies of the landmass's political struggles, the dark scenery of the dungeons and monsters, the overarching theme of war between the CPUs and the difficulty of setting aside their differences. It could have very easily been a more sobering story. But in actuality, it just juxtaposes the real nature of the game, which is silly goofy. Besides the dungeons themselves, some special side events open sometimes in the Explore menu that just show you some funny dialogue and banter between the characters, which is really appreciated. A lot of them also serve to make some big reference to a game, and mostly one that has to do with whatever console the landmass it takes place on represents. Planeptune has a scene with fast blue hedgehogs, Loey has one with a scary fire-breathing turtle named Wowzer, and who could forget Leanbox's Cogs of Battle? Seriously, references are shoved anywhere possible, even in normal story dialogue. Neptune casually drops a Bonanza Brothers reference, of all things. In regards to side events, there's also the 5PB radio show, hosted by 5PB, a special character. Completing side quests will open new events here, where the NPCs attach to them write to the show and express their gratitude for you completing it, which is a great touch of world building, along with providing intrinsic rewards for doing them. And, 5PB jump scare. Yes, like the company. We will get to this. Once you hit the point in the early game where the party searches for the key fragments on the other landmasses after Planeptune, you're actually free to travel anywhere you want at any time. Every landmass is entirely its own self-contained location, with unique dungeon lists and side quests. If you want to travel to a different landmass, you have to manually walk through a short dungeon to get there, which definitely can get tedious, but it also serves to make each landmass feel just that much more distinct. There's even a lengthy, skippable intro segment that plays for each one every time you arrive there, which is super cool. But yes, that means you have to go through this process every time you want to access any dungeon, event, or story that's located on a different landmass. Each landmass has its own main storyline you can progress at your own pace up until you find the key fragment for each, at least for the most part. Sometimes the plot for one landmass will grind to a halt until you hit a specific point in another, so it's just a matter of doing whatever is available. Unfortunately, that made some storylines kind of hard to follow since you need to jump around, and there were sections I left hanging for a long time until I finally returned to that landmass and kind of forgot what was going on. It also makes you way overleveled most of the time, since you need to be able to do anything in any order. So if you're strong enough to have progressed late into a landmass's story and then travel somewhere else to catch up, so to speak, then nothing's really going to be putting up a fight for a while. Plot-wise though, despite it being hard to follow at times, I do think it's really neat. Each landmass's story heavily involves its own political and historical troubles, so you get to learn about each one's culture. It also does a pretty good job at setting up the big plot-relevant realizations later too, which has to do with the underlying causes of every conflict you had to deal with on the landmasses. Everything from unraveling a governmental conspiracy in Leanbox that has to do with its unique class structure, mingling with the guild in Loui, which is a group of heretics who escaped from being genocided in Leanbox and was given a place to stay and thrive, and dealing with the machine-crazy company Avenir that sought to take over Last Station. All of this on the way to collecting their shiny key fragments. The goddesses of each landmass, did you forget about them already? Crop up here and there, but are mostly uninvolved, just showing up to beat the shit out of Neptune sometimes for the crime of existing. I mentioned the only 3 party members are Neptune, IF, and Compa until near the very end where the goddesses become involved, and that's kind of true. You see, there are 2 special guest characters you can encounter as well. Meet Nisa and Gust. One of the things Neptunia has become known for is quite literally including developer OCs into their games, which are commonly called maker characters. Yes, there is a character named Gust that is a walking, talking atelier reference, a money-hungry child obsessed with alchemy. And there is a character named Nisa, my beloved, who is a giant tokusatsu parody and is obsessed with being an epic heroine. How fitting that this game came out the same year as ZHP in Japan. These special characters show up in their own optional series of side events, after which they won't exactly join your battle party, but they will give you some special passive benefits. Gust makes items cheaper at the shop, and Nisa lets you see what effects dungeons will have on your shares, a special mechanic that we'll definitely be talking about later. And if you'll remember, 5PB is here too with her radio show. I love her design, and as a massive fan of science adventure, which 5PB's name is attached to, I may be a bit biased. It's unbelievably funny that they just included the studios as characters, but even funnier is that the other 2 main characters are also studio inserts, which was probably easy to pick up on. Compa for Compile Heart and IF standing for Idea Factory, which means that every human main cast member is a maker character. That is how far Neptunia goes to intertwine real gaming culture into its games. The other characters even give IF the nickname Iffy because their branch over here is actually Idea Factory International, which would be IFI, so iffy. Gust and Nisa don't appear in the main story at all, just in these humorous side events, but they're a cool addition. So what's the actual gameplay of Hyperdimension Neptunia like? Most people are probably just familiar with ReVerse, but they might as well be 2 entirely different games at this point. The original Neptunia is a traditional turn-based game, instead of having the field movement given to ReVerse. It also has random encounters, whereas ReVerse puts the enemies on the map to let you battle intentionally. When you're walking around in a dungeon, you can switch between any character on the fly. And I don't mean just anyone in the battle party, anyone you've unlocked, which is kinda sick. There's a practical purpose too. Each character has one of 3 different field abilities they can use in a dungeon, which is smashing a hammer to clear debris and free up passages, summoning a wave of monsters at will in exchange for not having any encounters for a while afterwards, or being able to detect where a hidden treasure chest is in the dungeon. The battle system is unique, to say the least. When you attack, it comes as not just one attack, but an entire combo that you can set up. This is the only form of attack. A combo can go up to 4 attacks, but you can do as many attacks and combos as you like until you run out of AP, which each move uses a certain amount of. A character's turn never has to end until they run out of AP. You can even cancel out of a combo and just start a new one at any time. Characters learn their own set of moves to use in combos by leveling up. Your combos are based on the triangle, circle, and X face buttons, and you have complete freedom in setting them up. Every single combination of 4 attacks using these 3 buttons is its own combo, which means their order very much matters. Every order of button presses is its own attack line. Some stronger attacks can only be used after a certain point in a combo though, such as only for the 3rd or 4th hit, and can't be said earlier. You're incentivized to think more about which attack in a combo comes last by way of special ending effects. A lot of attacks will have special effects that only trigger if you use them at the end of a combo. One of these effects is a combo link, which gives you the option to restore some AP and keep the same combo going. It does this by turning whatever button you press for that 4th attack into the assumed 1st attack instead, so you need to be mindful with how you set up your combo tree if you want to keep using effective attacks after a link. Or alternatively, you can just cancel out of it and start a new combo, but that's a little less efficient. Another effect is being able to switch. See, there aren't only 3 members on the field. Not really. You can technically have a backup character for each battling character that you can switch between using an attack with this ending effect. And the thing is that each character's AP is totally separate, so you can effectively double the length of a turn by using two characters' entire AP meter. Switching keeps the same combo going too, so you can theoretically use two entire characters worth of AP in one single combo, if you set it up right. The problem with this is that, again, without DLC, there are only 3 party members to even speak of for 95% of the game, so it's kind of bizarre that this is even a mechanic. I really wish they went harder into giving you more party members so you could really make use of it, because it has so much potential for satisfying strategies in stringing together massive and effective combos. I guess they were really banking on you spending some extra bucks for DLC to do just that. Or maybe they thought it might be a good strategy to only have 2 members on the field so one could utilize Switch. I can't really see that happening. I did my first playthrough without DLC just to see what it was like, and then bought the extra content for my New Game Plus playthrough, and I never wanted to do that. Then there's HDD mode. Plot-wise, goddesses have 2 forms, human form and CPU form, with the latter being much stronger, and that translates to gameplay too. Some attacks have an ending effect of transform, an effect obviously exclusive to goddess characters, that turns them into their CPU form. This basically just gives them higher stats, so it's a given for boss fights. Thankfully, you can skip battle animations completely by pressing one of the triggers during any attack, which, let me tell you, is an unbelievable lifesaver, because attack animations are long, and this game, admittedly, is already slow-paced enough. So apologies if my combat footage isn't particularly interesting. I had to preserve my own sanity. This is a theme among every single game in this video. There's strangely a sort of real-time element to the combat as well, in the way enemy guards work. Each enemy has a guard meter, which goes down per hit in your combo, so if you use attacks that hit multiple times, you can get their guard down easier. Once their guard is depleted, their guard broken, in which they take more damage, but their guard meter goes back up in real time, so you have to quickly hammer out combos before it restores. It's actually kinda neat. There's certainly an interesting energy to frantically spamming attacks in a turn-based game. Combos are just one of 2 main aspects to the combat. The offensive aspect, as in, the only moves you can ever dish out are attacking moves. If you want anything regarding support, we need to look at a different system entirely. You see, there are no consumables you can just simply use in battle, or even SP in Hyperdimension Neptunia. The privilege of being able to use any support skills to heal, revive, cure ailments, etc. is tied to the item skill system. There is a set of 4 special consumables you constantly collect throughout the game, from defeating enemies, opening chests, or straight up buying them from the shop. These special consumables exist solely to serve this system, but you don't just simply use them in battle. That would be way too easy and convenient. Your ability to heal and all actions related is determined by pure RNG. Each character has a set of what are known as item skills, which all serve the purpose of support. Leveling up gives them more item points to allocate to these skills. Each skill has a max of 100 points to dump into it, directly denoting the % chance it has to trigger in battle, only under very specific conditions and for a cost of these special consumables. For example, everyone has some basic self-healing that restores a certain percentage of health only when their health is under a certain amount and only after they take damage. So you need to not only bank on them surviving, but also survive under a certain amount of health, and only then will they heal a certain percentage of their max health back, which in and of itself is RNG even when you have a skill at 100%, depending on its conditions. You have to predict where your health might be in the immediate future and adjust your skills accordingly. And if you run out of consumables, you're just shit out of luck entirely. I actually really admire the unique idea. It's unlike anything else I've seen. It's just way too restricting. And for a system that's already this restricting by default, there is a staggering lack of versatility in item skill selections. There are only a precious few that do more useful things like revive allies or heal the entire party. Whose bright idea was it to go, oh sorry, Kampa's health is too high, guess she can't heal her allies? Listen, this game gets a lot of flack, and I don't think much of it is deserved, but this is one of the only areas where it's pretty deserved. There is another glaring issue that I'd be remiss not to mention though, and that is the game's performance. This game is slow. I mean, yes, in terms of some quality of life, like needing to manually walk to the landmasses, but I more so mean that it just runs slowly. I really thought my PS3 might be freezing up when I was plopped into the first dungeon and got to walk around for the first time. But no, that's just how it plays. Walking, opening chests, battle animations, switching characters both on and off the battlefield, holy hell. There's even a super long pre-battle animation that I'm pretty sure is just the game disguising its load time, because there's no way to skip it at the beginning of every single battle. It didn't take too long for me to just get used to it and not think about it after a while, but for people more sensitive to that kind of thing, just be aware. Also, grinding in this game is wacky. You are going to get a pitiful amount of experience from normal enemies no matter where you are for the level you're at. Oddly enough, you're clearly not really meant to grind normal enemies. You get a ton of experience from dungeon bosses, both for the main story and side dungeons, but you know what also gives a ton of experience? Our Lord and Savior, the Cleone. You see, the Monster Call field ability works with special summoning circles you'll find in many dungeons. These circles will always house a specific Cleone. There are 7 different Cleones you can find in the game, all with varying strength, and all found from these circles. They're pretty tanky and strong, but they also give an unholy amount of experience, and they're not unreasonable to grind at all. In fact, it is far and away the fastest way to gain experience. If you find a Cleone you can grind in an easily accessible place near the entrance of a dungeon, you've suddenly just pushed story progress back multiple hours so you can bask in this grinder's paradise. At least that's how I am. You know I just can't resist me some numbers going up. There's not too much in the way of post-game. After you beat the final boss, you'll be asked if you want to continue or start a New Game Plus. If you opt not to start a New Game Plus and continue, the final boss is still available so you can play it again, but also a little bit more content opens up, including a few more optional dungeons and some more side events that you can view. It's also great for being able to get the normal ending and the true ending in one playthrough. However, getting the true ending requires you to play in a very particular way in order to not get locked out, and that requires you to be intimately familiar with shares. Just like the companies of the real world, these landmasses are powered by investors. Well, more specifically, their shares. And the investors are just people's belief in the goddesses. The more shares a landmass has, the stronger the goddess, at least canonically. However, there are only 100 shares to go around, so if one raises, another must drop. Shares are affected by completing optional side dungeons, except you can't actually see how they're affected for any given dungeon without recruiting Nisa. Having her will see what all your shares will be after you've cleared a given dungeon on the dungeon select screen. Your current shares distribution can be viewed in the pause menu. So if you want to get a landmass's shares up, you have to keep completing side dungeons until it's where you want it. Why would you want to do this? Soon before the final boss, you can go around to each landmass and ask their goddesses for help. They'll reject you at first, but if you raise any given landmass's shares above 30, a new mission will open up there that will let you recruit that goddess. And raising its shares to 50 will unlock a bunch of optional events to view involving that goddess, which you need to do for trophies because they involve watching every single event. Raising Planeptune's shares is also required for some extra scenes with Gust and Nisa too, by the way, for all my event hunters out there. Only to 40 in that case. Only defeating the final boss with all goddesses recruited will get you the true ending, but you can easily screw yourself over with shares too. You see, there is a sinister 5th shares pool simply called Other. Exiting any dungeon prematurely without completing its objective in any capacity will count as failing the dungeon. This includes just walking out of the exit and using the special eject items that will warp you out of a dungeon. Whenever you do this, one single share from each landmass will be transferred to Other. You'll have to then complete certain side dungeons that transfer the shares back if you want them out. The real kicker though is that letting a goddess die in battle permanently decreases their shares by 1. It doesn't transfer anywhere else, it disappears forever, meaning if you're not careful with Neptune, you could end up with significantly less than 100 shares to work with. Shares will also never decrease below 5, with the exception of Other that can go to 0, and since you're working with a limited pool, you won't get any share increases from dungeons that normally give them to you if the shares they're pulling from are already at their minimum. The game does not explain any of this to you, by the way, there is no mention of shares whatsoever. Everything resets with New Game Plus, including shares, but that also means every single unlockable. Levels and gear carry over, but side dungeons and recruitable characters do not, so you'll always have to wait until the end of the game to recruit the goddesses again, which also means going through the trouble of share manipulation, which is a pretty annoying way to do a New Game Plus. It's kind of a shame you don't really get to know the goddesses until the very end of the game, but I do think it's worth the effort of getting them. I mean, yes, for the true ending, but also because the scenes in that ending and the optional side scenes that open up with them do a good job at making you care about them even though you've only just properly met them. There are a few scenes with them throughout the story before this that are really touching, and in fact, I'd argue even benefit from them only being minor antagonists, since the little you see of them opening up to Neptune hits harder because of it. However, all of these ending scenes where they join your party proper and team up with Neptune see them going through their own little character arcs that all culminate into something really special as they finally learn to set aside their differences. For example, Vert has a whole arc where she realizes the damage she's been causing to her own nation by being too absorbed in video games and neglecting her people, so she begins to overcompensate by working herself too much. That kind of thing is something you just don't really see in ReVerse. Instead, playing too many games is just Vert's whole personality trait. Well, that and Yuri bait. There's actually an entire section of the original that's totally absent in Rebirth because of a very important decision Neptune has to make after they get all the key fragments. Without going into details, she makes the complete opposite choice in each version, which I found very interesting. The choice she makes in this game has her go on a whole little character arc as she tries to come to terms with it, and it's a great moment for her. Now, the goddesses aren't the only extra characters, because Hyperdimension Neptunia has DLC, and holy shit, a lot of it. Over $90 worth. The vast majority of this, though, is just cosmetics like extra costumes. There's actually only about $16 worth of meaningful extra content, by which I mean anything else. Extra DLC side dungeons are completely free, so this $16 includes 4 extra playable characters and the ability to raise your level cap from the normal 99 to 999. And so, indirectly, the DLC dungeons are actually not really free because most of them lie in the hundreds of recommended levels range, which is not obtainable without the paid level cap raising DLC. Good to see that scummy DLC practices have been a thing from the very start. 2 of the extra playable characters are, as you may expect, Gust and Nisa, no longer just guests. And then there are 2 more maker characters, recruited after a rather lengthy series of side events that open up during the game that serve as a way to characterize them and get you to know them. These are 5PB and Red. You may know the company 5PB better as what they changed their name to later, Mages, of science adventure fame, among other things. So yes, the funny radio show broadcaster is actually playable, and you get to see a lot of her personality from the events that open up with the DLC, how she's actually extremely shy when she's not performing. Red is in reference to Red Entertainment, whose name is attached to the popular Sakura War series as well as Fossil Fighters, and a lot of other things. Unless I missed something, I don't think anything about her shows up in non-DLC content, so this is totally out of left field, but she's a very entertaining character. Platinuming this game is a bit of a doozy, mostly because of a trophy that requires you to get all 3 main collection categories to 100%. These are viewing all the events in the game, completing all of the dungeons, both main story ones and optional ones, and completing the bestiary, none of these including DLC content. The strongest non-DLC optional dungeons are recommended level 99, one of which is noticeably more difficult than all the rest and houses a boss called Shiva, so you'll need to be at least strong enough to beat him. You also need to get S ranks in all the optional dungeons for a trophy, because yes, dungeons actually rate you. It's pretty non-consequential because it just hinges on the time it takes you to complete them, and the time constraints are very lenient. You can easily just come back to them all and clear them quickly once you're high level. You can also always save scum encounters for better RNG for dungeons that require specific enemies or drops. The dungeon Worst Machine of the Year on Planeptune has a Cleone super close to the entrance that gives you 2 million experience each, the most of any Cleone, so that's a great place to grind. As for the events, as long as you view them as they pop up, you won't really miss any permanently, aside from ones that only appear under certain conditions. These are, again, ones that only appear in Leanbox, Last Station, and Louis when their shares are 50 or higher, and also ones for when Planeptune's shares are at least 40 for events regarding Nisa and Gust. For the bestiary, you'll probably have to do a New Game Plus run because many monsters are only present in dungeons that only show up once for the story and can't be revisited afterwards. There's a good list someone posted of all these missable monsters, and I can confirm it's very accurate. As for non-missable ones, once you have all the dungeons, it's just a matter of comparing your bestiary list to a complete one online to know what enemies you're missing. The game lets you view all the dungeons you've unlocked in the tome section and shows you all the monsters that are available there, so once you've identified one you don't have yet, you can look right there in the game and find the dungeon it appears in. The only other weird thing to watch out for are the Cleones, which there are 7 different types of, each giving a different amount of experience and having their own bestiary entries. All of the Cleones can be found inside dungeons that aren't missable. Also, the final bosses for both endings, normal and true, give you different bestiary entries. All in all, I actually enjoyed the original Hyperdimension Neptunia, you know, once you get over its general slowness. It's got some cool ideas, and I'm actually a pretty big fan of the combo system, however clunky its menus may make it look. It does end up having some deeper things to say about the characters and console wars narratively, but at its heart, it still knows how to laugh and have fun with itself, which I really appreciate. Even more so with its eventual remake a few years later, Hyperdimension Neptunia Rebirth 1. Tragically, this entry is not in fact published by NIS America. Idea Factor and NIS America cut ties shortly after the series started, so our precious Nisa only stars in a select few early games. Rebirth 1 is not one of them. Oh, and I guess Gust is gone too. Rebirth 1 is a complete remake with much prettier graphics and models on display, although I do miss the crunchy PS3 ones. It is also very different from its original counterpart. This is because, from what I have read, the Rebirth line is actually built on Neptunia Victory, the third mainline entry, which was very recent at the time of Rebirth's release, so its combat and mechanics are remarkably similar to that game. And that game is already a far cry away from the original Neptunia 1. It is truly one of a kind even in its own series. Here before anyone comments about Trinity Universe. I'm going to be talking about Rebirth 1 as a direct comparison to OG Nep 1, considering that is literally the game it's claiming to be a remake of. But I am well aware that it was made to resemble basically any other Neptunia game, especially Victory. However, Mark II, the original Neptunia 2, is actually where a lot of Neptunia staples were first introduced, and thus is where many things integrated in Rebirth 1 originally came from, right down to the very structure of the game. The 2D world map, the revamped combo system, lily ranks, the methodology of the dungeon designs and layouts, tons of enemy designs. I could go on and on. Of course, the most notable difference between HDN and Rebirth 1 right off the bat is in its entire presentation. Rebirth 1 is much more menu-based, which is really saying something. But at least in the original, you had 3D models and designs of all the landmasses to look at, and you could even see all the floating islands around them that acted as your monster-filled dungeons. It felt like a real world that you could look at and visit. In Rebirth, you simply move the cursor around the map and select stuff from there. It's not the biggest deal in the world, and it's a very pretty map, but it makes the world feel a little less alive. And then there's the dungeon design. Again, I know this kind of thing is originally from other mainline entries, but even compared to the original HDN, where they weren't anything special in the first place, this is a whole new level of not trying. In HDN, there are only a handful of dungeon visual themes they used, but a lot of those themes at least served the same general area or even the same exact area. For example, Hirui Castle in Leanbox had many different dungeons in it, and those dungeons all had different layouts that were used to represent which floor of the castle you were on. So each visual theme represented a specific area, and the different places in that area had their own dungeon layout. You got the impression that each place was far bigger than what you could actually see. Rebirth 1 just throws any rhyme or reason out the window. There are, again, only a handful of visual themes used, but this time hardly any dungeons that use the same theme have a different layout. It's just copy-paste, and it's more so based on the type of area it is. So ruins would all get the same exact ruins theme and layout. It made me never really interested in new dungeons. It's just like, oh, here are the ruins again, or here's the forest again. Hey look, the cyber place. Oh, and some dungeons will have multiple parts, so you'll hit the end and then you can go to the next section, so okay, cool, more dungeon. But then the next section is literally the exact same layout, but mirrored? Like, what are we doing here, guys? Virtual Forest, for example, is not a real place because it just looks like every other damn forest. No area is unique, and that's really unfortunate. But I'm a flawed human being because at the end of the day, it's okay as long as I have a place to go and watch the funny numbers go up. While we're talking about dungeons though, the collectibles are different as well, and overall dungeon exploration is watered down. Characters don't have field abilities anymore, there's just one universal one, which is being able to spam a button that will reveal hidden treasure if it's close by. Treasures in this game are just some little blue orbs you can pick up as you go, instead of the big heavy treasure chests in the original. That probably sounds very nitpicky, but it did make me miss the original, and I think it contributes to the overall watering down they did of the game's presentation. That's not to say it's a complete downgrade, at least the NPCs actually get real visible portraits instead of just being silhouettes. Regarding the story, it is completely linear now, except for a small section at the end of the game, which is common among both versions. No more jumping around between the landmasses and progressing different storylines. The party travels to Last Station, then they travel to Leanbox, then they travel to Lowee, then the story goes from there, and none of them really involve the geopolitical or cultural intricacies of the landmasses anymore. That's all been kinda stripped out. Rebirth is also split into 8 chapters, for whatever reason, which you'd never know because there are no title cards if it weren't for the achievements that popped up when you started a new chapter. The answer as to why they're here is probably because the other mainline games before it were also split into chapters. The big story beats in this version are largely the same, except the true endings, which are extremely different, and obviously for spoiler reasons I won't say anything further about that, other than the fact that the fates of the goddesses are irreconcilably different, and I could not predict which one they would go with if they end up doing any kind of continuation, but I digress. Remember, this is a standalone timeline. I would say the other biggest difference story-wise are how the goddesses are handled. Right off the bat, they clearly don't want anything to do with the console war, and they all join your party pretty soon after you meet them. This means they play a much bigger role in the main story, and are Neptune's friends far more than they are her enemies, a complete reversal from the original. Unfortunately, this also means IF and Compa are much less relevant, but it's nice to see more of the goddesses. Although, again, a lot of their deeper character arcs just kind of don't exist. ReVerse almost makes them caricatures of what they were originally, and focuses more on their banter and goofy moments. The party dynamic between all the goddesses is front and center. It says a lot about the direction Neptunia ended up going in. This series is known for over-the-top comedy, which was already seen in the original, but they completely embrace it here. While I like the way the characters were handled more in the original, the comedy of ReVerse, again, is what I experienced first, and what I really fell in love with starting out, so I'm certainly not saying it was a bad thing to go in this direction. But I will say it still would have been nice if they at least kept the same depth to the goddesses. Likewise, the main villain is no secret. In the original, a mysterious figure kept showing up all throughout the Landmasses storylines. Only after they were all resolved and the key fragments were obtained was it revealed who she was. This is why I didn't really say much about this when I was talking about the original, because of the way it's handled. It's much more mysterious and saved for later in the game. However, ReVerse says to hell with all subtlety. Arthwar, as she is known as, is a complete punching bag who the party encounters and fights at every corner. A complete parody of evil-looking villain who evilly laughs and does evil things. I mean, hell, they even changed the opening cutscene in ReVerse so that it's her that encourages the goddesses to gang up on someone, as opposed to a decision they came up with on their own. And man, do they really want to make it obvious with ReVerse's new CG. The fights against her get very repetitive, and because of the goddesses being more of your friends than enemies, you don't really have any reason to fight them, whereas in the original you fought them all the time. So ReVerse makes up an excuse to still have you fighting them by just having Arthwar turn into them. Yeah, the whole copying ability is just a ReVerse thing. I already gushed about what ReVerse does do very well narratively, which is all the character interactions and comedy. When it comes to Neptunia overall, this is one of the best things about it. Another thing I do love though is that since the original HDN, the series has gone hard into implementing more maker characters. There are a ton in Birth 1, but none of them are the same as in the original. They're all different, and they all come from other mainline entries that came out before ReVerse, so none of them are completely new either. They all even make comments alluding to the fact that they're familiar with Neptune, but not in this reality. Broccoli, Tekken, CyberConnect 2, Falcom, Marvelous, and even a new character for 5PB's real-life company name change, Mages, all get a spot here. Mages is a walking, talking Steins Gate reference in that she's a caricature of Okabe Rintaro, complete with Chunibyo tendencies, frequently talking to nobody on the phone, her own nonsensical sign-off phrase, and an unhealthy obsession with knockoff Dr. Pepper. God, I love Neptunia. As for the gameplay, thankfully, Birth 1 does away with random encounters, instead having enemies roaming around on the map. I've always just preferred it that way. If they run into you from behind, they get a turn advantage in battle, but if you hit them with an attack, you get the advantage. You have to time it right though, as the enemy will also get the advantage if they catch you in your attack animation. So if you miss and they run into you before you recover, bam, enemy turn advantage. I like it as a way to keep things a bit more engaging. In ReVerse, the combat is still turn-based, but you have field movement as well. There's a stat for each character tied to how far they can move from where they started their turn, and each weapon you can equip has their own range you can target enemies from with a basic attack. Any enemy in that range can be attacked at the same time, which makes weapons with large range areas really nice. Likewise, skills or special attacks will have varying AoEs that'll hit whatever enemies are within a certain radius of the one you're targeting, and same with applying buffs and the like. HDD mode plays a bigger role here, given that you have more goddesses to work with, and they're automatically put into HDD for boss fights. Not gonna lie, that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth at first as it felt too handholdy, but I grew to appreciate it since it means it doesn't come at the cost it normally comes at. That cost, instead of being an end of combo effects like in the original, is being able to spend 20% of your SP at any time in battle to transform. Enemies still have a guard meter like in the original, but here it doesn't restore in real time. Instead, it just restores itself a little bit on the enemy's next turn, and if you attack it again after it restores any guard, that attack will still do guard broken damage, but it will also knock the enemy out of guard break until its guard is depleted again. Your attacks all have separate stats for how much normal damage they do and how much guard damage they do. Some attacks are way better at lowering enemy guard, and others are more focused on raw damage. Theoretically, the idea is that you'd use good guard breaking skills and then big damage skills while their guard is down. But the thing is, you're completely at the mercy of the turn order as to whether it'll actually happen that way, lest the enemy's guard restores, and you have to use non-attacking turns just to get to your one precious big attack you can still get the guard broken boost from. It can be an option to not attack anyway if their guard is super low and their turn is immediately coming up, so that they don't just instantly restore it. Oh, but if a big damage dealer goes right after that, well, now you can't get the damage boost and have to use their turn just to finally deplete their guard instead. Choose wisely. There are quite a few ways to strategize with it. It sounds like a good system to balance damage, especially with how broken EXE skills are, which I'll soon talk about, but it leads to just enough annoying situations like that it feels like you're fighting against it most of the time, and I didn't find it to be very satisfying in general, and is my main source of grievance along with the simplified combo system. When it comes to your normal attacks, you can still set up your own combo, but in a more basic way. Combos are still technically in 4s, but the first attack is always just your basic attack, with only the next 3 being customizable. The order of inputs no longer matters, you simply set which attack you want the face buttons to use, only depending on where in the string it falls, the first attack, second, or third. Each of the face buttons also has its own set of attacks you can use for it, so you can't assign any attack to any button. These pertain to 3 defined categories. Triangle attacks are rush attacks, which specialize in multi-hit moves, X attacks tend to have high guard damage, and square attacks are your power move for bigger damage. You only get one combo per turn, so your options are severely limited compared to the original. There are no strategies for extending your combo, which is what the original was all about. You can still switch with an assigned backup character, but it uses up your entire turn. Likewise, you can still end your combo early, but it also ends your entire turn. It's much more restricting. What I can say I like better about it is that 1, item skills are a thing of the past, instead opting for a more traditional SP system, to which I say, good riddance. Characters can now just heal whenever they want using a skill or an item, how unheard of. There's also the kind of variety you'd normally expect from an RPG in these skills for support, like stat modifying buffs and debuffs, which were notably lacking in the original. I will miss lunatic mode though. And of course, there are a bunch of strong offensive moves you can use with SP in place of a normal attack combo. However, against bosses at least, the combo system and even SP skills clearly were not intended to be the main form of attack in Rebirth. What do I mean by this? Well, multi-hit moves don't serve the function of being better for guard breaking here, since that's its own damage stat now. Instead, they serve a different purpose, filling the EXE gauge. The EXE gauge is a special gauge that fills when you hit or get hit. The more hits you land on an enemy, the more it fills, and it can go up to 4 levels once you unlock them by progressing the story. There are actually additional attacks you can perform called EXE finishers at the end of your combo, depending on what level of EXE gauge you have, which is a nice little bonus. By the way, I said there is no extending your combo, but technically some characters, or just Neptune from my own observation, do learn one of these EXE finishing moves called Combo Link that serves the express purpose of doing just that. A little reference to the combat system of the original game. That's not the main purpose of the EXE gauge though. More importantly, you can spend EXE gauge levels to use special EXE skills, and you will quickly find the entire game to be balanced around your EXE skills, because quite simply, these are broken beyond belief. As a result, bosses are incredibly tanky. Normal combo attacks aren't even gonna touch their health bar, but EXE skills will put a sizable dent in it, making the core strategy of how many EXE skills you can build up and spam the hell out of at a time. Despite my other grievances with the system, I will admit, it is pretty damn satisfying to build up and fire off EXE skills and watch a boss's health bar finally get shredded, especially when the turn order lands just right for it. Also, Rebirth 1 has XP share for every single party member, whether they're battling with you or not, so anyone is always viable to use without any extra grinding, which is fantastic. The original did not do this. Like the original, you can only have 3 party members in battle at a time, and some special EXE skills are only available if specific characters are fighting together, but Rebirth also keeps the partner system. You can assign a backup character or partner to each fighter that you can spend a turn to switch between in battle. As a trade-off for its limited capabilities with the new battle system, Rebirth makes partner characters give the fighting character some passive buffs based on their Lily rank with each other, which is essentially just an affection mechanic. Different characters give different buffs, like more experience gained, resistances to certain types of attacks, or even some new attacks to use, and some are only effective above certain Lily ranks. The Lily rank between 2 characters goes up the more they fight together. Besides your normal weapons and armor, you can also craft custom CDs that you can equip for passive effects. You can get specific parts to burn onto your CDs as normal material drops from dungeons or side quests in Coliseum rewards. Parts come in either yellow, blue, or red types, and there are different levels of each. A part can be level 1 through level 5. CDs themselves only come from medals, which are special items you can get from certain bosses or strong dungeon enemies. When you get one, a new event will appear at Neptune, and you'll get a CD from it. Different CDs have a different fixed combination of types of parts it can hold and the max level those parts can be. They can give your characters things like increased experience or credit gains, decreased damage from certain types of enemies or attacks, charging the EXE gauge faster. There's a lot. Since there are a limited amount amount of discs to use, you can wipe a disc to put new parts into it at any time, but you'll permanently lose the old parts. Side quests in Rebirth aren't new dungeons like in the original. Now they simply ask you to do certain things in pre-existing dungeons, but the process is basically the same. Kill a certain amount of an enemy, collect specific materials, etc, etc. Then you turn in the requests once the requirements are met. The side quests actually all come from the Guild, an organization in game industry considered heretics for following a goddess of a landmass other than the one they were born on. They were explored pretty in-depth in the original HDN story. Rebirth just kinda drops all that, but hey, now the Guild is your side quest facility, and that's all it is. There's also the Colosseum, which is unlocked about halfway into the game and offers a bunch of optional fights, again for credits and other various rewards. You can redo fights as much as you want, and you reap all the benefits every time, so it can be a nice way to grind for certain things. Side quests and Colosseum fights also have a certain other effect on the game, and that is raising and lowering shares. Yes, unfortunately, the rather archaically irritating mechanic of shares have astonishingly not been dropped, and they pretty much work the exact same way. You can't permanently lose shares anymore, thank God, so goddesses dying in battle is not an issue, and you can always see the effect any side quest or Colosseum fight will have on them. Given the fact that you can redo all the Colosseum fights and most side quests, those are your main sources of share manipulation. In Rebirth, shares actually very slightly affect the stats of the goddesses, but not enough to actually matter much. Like in the original, the biggest effect they have on the game is determining your ending and being able to recruit some new party members. For the true ending, you need to beat the final boss while the other shares are at 0%, and the other 4 landmasses are above at least 20%. Any other distribution will get you the normal ending. Extra party members come in the form of the Neptunia 2 main CPU characters that can be unlocked in Pleneptune, Last Station, and Loe. Poor Leanbox doesn't get a CPU candidate. Once you hit the last chapter, Chapter 8, you can get any of those 3 landmasses shares to 30% to unlock a new plan for each one. Crafting the plan requires materials that you can find from strong enemies that only appear with the Add Enemies plan in effect in dungeons from Chapter 7, where the story gets non-linear for a bit. But also part of each plan's crafting requirements is having that landmass at 50% shares, so really you need to get each to 50% to craft the plans and unlock each extra character. Shares don't really do anything else except be a prerequisite for crafting certain plans sometimes. Plans are a whole new system implemented in Rebirth 1, which the game also calls the remake system. Get it? Because it's a remake. Plans are permanent things you can put into effect by trading in materials. If that sounds incredibly vague, that's because they can literally be anything. You'll get a lot of them from pop-ups on the world map that'll appear at certain story points, and may go away forever if you don't get them before you get too much further. You can also pick a lot of them up as treasure in dungeons. Once you pick up a new plan, you can trade in the required materials to activate it. The vast bulk of plans are items that you can add to the shop. Consumables, weapons, armor, accessories, outfits, you name it. For every dungeon in the game, there are also plans for changing the materials you can find in it, and plans to add stronger boss enemies you can use to grind or pick up unique materials from. There are some super special system-wide plans that have major effects too, like strengthening or weakening enemies, which don't change the amount of experience or anything else you get from them, don't worry, I was just as disappointed. Being able to jump higher in dungeons for whatever reason, which you actually need to fully traverse some optional ones, by the way, or even just straight up gaining more experience. My only huge gripe with plans is that if you don't get them in time, they can go away forever. And this applies to the ones for adding stronger boss enemies to dungeons too, which really matters because each enemy drops a unique material, so you can potentially get locked out of obtaining certain materials forever, which you will probably need for other plans. The game has a New Game Plus, so you can always start over and speed through the story again, but it is still extremely annoying, especially for the optional dungeons. There are a bunch of side dungeons that are optional, and each one has a plan you need to craft to unlock it. So if you miss picking up plans for those dungeons when they appear, you can get locked out of not just that dungeon, but actually a lot of them just from that, because most side dungeon plans are actually found as treasure in other optional dungeons. Oh, and you only have a certain amount of arbitrary storage to use on plans, called MB, which is used up forever when you make one. Plans require a certain amount of MB to make, and you might not have enough to make all the ones you want. The only way to get more is by running New Game Pluses, because the storage expansions you get throughout the story keep working. So if you've used up all your MB, which is very easy to do once you get to the end and post-game where some plans just cost a ton, not to mention the sheer amount of them, you basically just have to do the story again. And if you're really unlucky, again. Except I have since found out that if you have the Shares Quest DLC, it adds 4 new guild quests to complete, which is one for defeating a fake version of each goddess. I saw and did some of these while playing the game for share's sake, because their main purpose is that they actually skyrocket landmass shares. However, Fake Purple Heart in particular drops a 1024 megabyte chip, and these quests are repeatable. So there's your megabyte exploit, just farm fake a purple heart. The quests only unlock in Chapter 8, by the way. If it weren't for the highly missable nature of plans and the asinine things you can get locked out of because of it, it would actually be a cool system. They're a fun way to give you endless uses for all the materials you accumulate from enemies throughout the game, and provide incentive to keep material hunting to unlock more stuff. But unfortunately, they feel rather poorly implemented, and the entire idea of MB just serves to make them even more of a pain in the ass. As you might expect, there is a lot of DLC. The most bang for your buck are the 3 packs called Additional Content 1, 2, and 3. Altogether, they raise the level cap from 99 to 999, just like in the original, but there are a ton of other individual packs that mostly contain extra dungeons and extra playable characters from other Neptunia entries, along with a few things that have no right being paid DLC, like the ability to have your other party members visible while walking in a dungeon, or even just being able to rewatch cutscenes? I'm serious, there is a DLC pack that adds a theater where you can rewatch past cutscenes. The extra characters are definitely the biggest selling point. I could not care less about extra dungeons if I tried. They're basically all still just rehashed themes and layouts from the main game. There is no selling point other than from the purely functional standpoint of maybe having more options for grinding. The grinding part is kind of important though, because while most of the achievements in the game aren't too bad, they're mostly just from going through the main story, getting the true ending, and unlocking the extra characters, you do also have to get nearly every character to level 99. Now, with the level cap of 999 and extra dungeons boasting super strong enemies, this is not that difficult, especially with the XP share. Everyone's gonna hit level 99 at roughly the same time. The most straightforward method to do this is using our good friends, the Cleones. The extra side dungeon, Millennium Labyrinth, has a Cleone that appears when you use the Add Enemies plan to it, which can easily get you into the hundreds of levels. For earlier though, I found that the Zeta Hirobo at Factory 459 with the Add Enemies plan on is pretty good to grind on. But if you want to get to 999, which is a good idea if you want to grind for credits, which is another grind heavy achievement, the Cleone at Yukawa Ruins is a little bit stronger and gives more experience once you can handle that one too, and there's a stronger one still at Zeka Ruins too. At recommended level 500, with the additional content DLC packs, a special fight in the Colosseum called Super Iron Knights will get you a little bit of experience, and then the Super Brawling Characters fight gives you even more? And a shit ton of credits from both of these too, which will easily get you that 100 million credits achievement. Just keep in mind that I think the additional content 2 DLC pack is a little bit bugged, because the content from it would not show up for me whatsoever, which included one of these Colosseum fights. Apparently it's a common problem, and it's because it doesn't activate on its own by default. You have to go into the Steam settings for the game and activate it manually for it to take effect. Rebirth and the original HDN might as well just be 2 entirely separate games, and that's pretty great. Yes, there is the choice paralysis, but I genuinely say they're both well worth experiencing. HDN is much stronger in the character development and, dare I say, even the combat regard, while Rebirth 1 has much more of the banter you'll come to know and love, as well as conventions that fall much more in line with the rest of the series. However, we are still not done with Neptunia 1. For whatever ungodly reason, Idea Factory decided to remake Neptunia 1 again. Except it's more like a remake of a remake, because it's not its own entirely separate experience like HDN and Rebirth 1 are. They decided to just straight up remake Rebirth 1. So for all you curious minds, ReVerse aims to bring the experience of Rebirth 1 again, but with some added stuff and a visual overhaul. ReVerse looks very different, and it's not a difference I can say I agree with. Sure, the actual models look really good, most notably the characters themselves, but I'm personally not really a fan of the aesthetic they went with. Many of the environments are not subtle whatsoever with their coloration. Like, dear god, the depths of the valley areas look like the characters went straight to hell. It is saturated and heavy-handed, not to mention they clearly just kind of cranked the bloom all the way up and called it a day. I just didn't really like looking at it that much, especially when Rebirth already looks really good. And the same goes for the completely new UI. Rebirth's UI is colorful and very fitting for the vibe Neptunia brings. For whatever reason, ReVerse goes for a more bland UI design, stylized like you're in some kind of fancy business setting with sharp text and shapes and less colors in the menu selections. And these are the kinds of things that are most important when you're comparing games that are like 90% the same in terms of content. But that is not 100% because there are some minor content differences in ReVerse. For one, there's fishing. You unlock 5 different fishing holes throughout the game where you can fish for lots of different stuff. You'll also get some new types of fishing rods and bait as you progress that'll help you catch specific kinds of items or make it easier or harder to fish. You can catch some special fish that are references to game consoles that literally do nothing but are funny. You can catch actual equipment like weapons and armor, and you can catch 2 very special kinds of items, BGMs and old scenarios. The BGMs you can catch are the ReVerse specific remixes of old songs that this game sports that you can listen to in the music museum, and old scenarios each sequentially unlock cutscenes cutscenes from the PS3 version of Neptunia, letting you read through the entire original story once you get all of them. Although the cutscenes themselves aren't intact, you're actually just purely reading the dialogue boxes, which is a little bit odd, but hey, it's pretty cool nonetheless. You unlock 2 different kinds of bait near the end of the game that are each tied to BGMs and old scenarios that massively increase the chance to catch them. By the way, if you're having trouble with fishing in this game, it may feel like it's impossible to catch literally anything by the second fishing hole. That's because there's a trick to fishing, and if the game mentioned anything about this, I sure as hell missed it, but it was driving me insane and I had to look up just how to fish. When you're reeling in the fish, the basic idea is you just hold down the trigger, and that expends both your energy and the fish's energy. If you pull while the fish is struggling, it'll use up more of your energy, so you need to wait until it's calm for it to be the most effective. Now all that the game tells you, that's just basic fishing. But if you only know this, you will still be using way too much energy. No, you will use much less energy if you don't push the trigger all the way down. If you hover it just a little bit before that, there's a little sweet spot that will make fishing so much easier. It's a little bit insane. Aside from fishing, there are some extra characters that weren't in Rebirth 1. Another Falcom design and Cave, both originally from Mark II. Also, 5PB and Red returned from the original game after being absent from Rebirth. The biggest thing ReVerse sports over Rebirth 1 is that there are 2 entirely separate modes you can play in. There's Original Mode, which from what I understand is just Rebirth. The balancing and gameplay is exactly the same. I, however, played in the second mode called Arrange Mode, and that's because this mode changes the game pretty significantly. The content and story is exactly the same, and even all the gameplay mechanics are there, but Arrange Mode offers a different balance to the game. For one, you can have 4 characters in your party instead of 3, and you automatically start with all of the extra characters. Every single extra character you must unlock in some way in Original Mode is just available from the jump in Arrange Mode. This also applies to DLC characters, because in ReVerse, there are none. Everything that was DLC in Rebirth 1 is bundled in here with the base game automatically. In addition, the stats of characters and equipment are all different to make them generally stronger. Skills are stronger too and cost less SP. To offset all this making you overpowered as hell, a lot has been changed. Even though skills cost less SP, you have a much smaller pool of SP to actually work with, to the point where the SP cost ends up being more of a hindrance than in Rebirth, and by extension Original Mode. Observationally, I believe they made the enemies way tankier as well, because even normal fights just felt like a slog most of the time. There are also more enemies on the field in general in Arrange Mode. Oh, and a super annoying change is that units getting attacked will knock them back way more. Just hitting an enemy can, and most often will, send them to the other side of the damn arena, so you can't even hit them again with the same character in their next turn if their movement and or range isn't high enough. Likewise, getting hit could send you flying way back, and you need to spend an entire turn just to get closer to the enemy again, after which they could just send you back again. Short range characters become a hell of a lot more annoying to use all of a sudden. The process of endgame and postgame grinding is obscene now, because the experience required to level up has been completely changed for whatever reason. Under level 100, it is a chore to level up. They massively increase the amount of experience you need. When you hit level 70, 80, or especially 90 plus, it seems like a monumental task. But as soon as you get to 100, the experience needed to level up is drastically reduced all of a sudden. And I mean a million XP to get from 99 to 100, and then it drops to about 10,000 XP and gradually grows from there. And just to make it extra hard to hit those sweet triple digits, they also massively nerfed the experience that strong enemies give you. Yeah, that Cleone in Millennium Labyrinth doesn't do shit anymore. So here's my tip. In Nazni Volcano, at the very end of the depths, there are 2 strong enemies right near each other that'll give you about 90,000 experience each. This is more than most other strong enemies will give you, and they're relatively easy to grind given you can charge your EXE gauge quickly. Not to mention they're both right next to a save point. You can grind these until level 100, and then to get to 999, you can target the Cleone in Haneda Forest. If you have a full EXE gauge going into the fight, you can just spam EXE skills to immediately down it, and it gives you, an obscene amount of experience. The extremely annoying thing about this dungeon though is that there's a little bit of a gimmick. Even though the enemies aren't actually that strong attack-wise, they are ungodly tanky, and you need materials that the ghost enemies in this dungeon drop in order to make the add enemies plan for this dungeon, which is the only way to get the Cleone in there. Truly, grinding in this game is a Sisyphean task in every single way, until you unlock the Cleone and shoot from level 100 to level 999 in like 3 fights. I shit you not. I really don't know why they changed all of this, and I suspect that all of these changes are exclusive to Arrange mode. I did some light testing, and indeed, when comparing a new original mode save file to a new Rebirth1 save file, every single stat, SP cost, etc. was the same. Arrange mode, of course, was different. I even did some fights in original mode to make sure the whole knockback thing wasn't there, and it's not because it wasn't in Rebirth. That's as far as I'm going. I'm not playing Neptunia 1 a fourth time. It's probably safe to say that everything is exactly the same and all the balance changes are exclusive to Arrange mode. Luckily, you can get the trophies in either mode. They're a little different than Rebirth 1's, but they're mostly trivial. Most of them are just from playing the game normally. Some that might seem intimidating are getting all the BGMs and old scenarios from fishing, given that there are over 90 and over 60 of them respectively. But if you just use the bait made specifically to target them, it doesn't actually take that long. Maybe a couple hours for all of it. There's also a trophy for getting every fishing rod, all of which you just unlock in the shop, except one secret one. The best fishing rod can only be gotten as a rare catch from the last fishing hole you unlock. The real bad trophy is conquering the Colosseum. What does conquering the Colosseum entail, you may ask? It simply means clearing every Colosseum fight. Word to the wise, even just unlocking these is a pain, because there are Colosseum fights you have to unlock in specific ways. There are some plans you can find on the map early on in a New Game Plus that unlock Colosseum fights, but you also need to unlock all of the candidate characters because the plans for unlocking them also unlock some Colosseum fights. Naturally, you get these in the same way as Rebirth 1. But once you have all the fights, all you need to do is complete them, right? All you need to do. You'll notice that there are a few fights that are recommended level 900 plus, with a couple of them being right at 999. These are pure distilled bullshit. The level 900 ones might take a few tries, but they're not too bad. It's the level 999 one, specifically the one titled Mascot Returns, that will make you feel like all hope is lost. You can have the best gear, the best characters, the best setup, but even then, you are liable to be one-shotted at any time. I used a guide that was made for Rebirth 1 for my setup. I did it a bit differently since I was lazy about some things, and also the difference in the number of characters you can have on the battlefield at once was a little bit of a wrench. But I just used Blonde, Uni, Ram, and Vert for battle, all with their best gear, which there's another good guide for getting. And with these specific CDs outlined, again with some creative liberties, because holy shit, I am not using the CD you can only get after obtaining all the other CDs. Do you know how many CDs there are? I used all of that, along with a healthy dose of praying to God, because even with all that, you need to ride the RNG train to survive any given turn with how strong these enemies are. Even more so in ReVerse Arrange mode because of the dumbass knockback every unit has. So now you have to waste those precious turns after finally hitting the skill jammer one time just to get close enough to hit it again. Even with obscenely long range, the map is just enormous. It will take many tries, and don't be surprised if the majority of your turns are spent using healing or revival items. Trust me, that's normal and necessary. The truth is, I think almost everything they did in terms of balancing in Arrange mode, aside from starting with all the characters, only serves to make the game more of a slog in just about every single way possible. Original mode is still there, of course, but I can't actually recommend ReVerse. If you want to play Rebirth 1, I think just Rebirth 1 as opposed to ReVerse looks way better. The only things you'll be missing out on are a few extra characters and fishing, which isn't that big of a loss. Unless you really want to be able to read the dialogue of the original HDN, then that's in ReVerse. No matter what your personal preferences are though, hopefully you've gotten a good idea on what exactly makes each version stand out and what they're all about. HDN and Rebirth 1 stand on their own 2 feet just fine, and are both well worth playing, while ReVerse is a largely unnecessary and, dare I say worse, rehash of Rebirth 1. I really hope you all enjoyed me brain rotting over Neptunia for God knows how long, and if for whatever reason you want it to happen again, this is a big series after all, be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. I've been Mags, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.